Hi there, welcome to IndyCar Sunday Show on the 28th of April. Now, those of you who've been following news events in the last couple of days can't have avoided running into the SNP Spring Conference, which is on just at the moment at the Edinburgh International Conference Centre. Now, what you may or may not know is that David Lidington, about 3 days ago, this is the Conservative Minister, David Lidington, had said, and I'm paraphrasing him here, that they were not going to grant another Section 30 order. This is a Tory government, because, and as I say, I'm paraphrasing here, there is no appetite, no evidence, no polling evidence at all that the Scots have in any way changed their minds about independence. Now, move on 2 days, within 48 hours, a poll emerges, not in a nationalist, if you like, newspaper, not in an independence newspaper, but in one of the British government's own sort of friendly newspapers, publishes a poll in which the independence vote has jumped dramatically. And I say dramatically because it's jumped from allegedly 45% all the way up to 49% in 2 days. According to this poll. Now, had that happened in 2014, and on the day before polling day, that would have been a remarkable set of figures. That would have been an incredible jump in the independence movement's numbers. But remember that we're seeing a poll which was commissioned by a newspaper which is not pro-independence, it's actually very much anti-independence. And that poll will be very conservative. It probably won't include voters such as European Union voters. It might not include 16 and 17-year-olds. So the appetite for independence, according to the British newspaper's own polling, is almost tied. It's almost at 50%. It's actually within the bounds of accuracy, plus or minus 1%. So it's almost dead level according to the British state newspapers. Now, we know from other polls conducted in Scotland recently that the numbers of people in Scotland who want another independence referendum to happen are actually at 66%, not 49, but 66% actually want an independence referendum to take place. It's not exactly the same as wanting independence, but it does equate to wanting to vote on it again and wanting to change your mind. Only 34% of those polled in this newspaper poll done by the Scotsman last week, only 34% of them actually said they didn't want another independence referendum, indicating that they don't want any change in the status quo. So if you average out these two polls, one at 49%, one at 66%, somewhere in the middle there, we're certainly over 55%, I think. And for David Lidington to come out and say there hadn't been any change in opinion in Scotland and that there was no appetite for another referendum is plainly a load of old tosh, because he's been disproved within 2 days. Now, that takes us up to the SNP conference, and I woke up this morning to a screaming newspaper headline in the newsagent's window which said words to the effect of Sturgeon loses currency vote. Shock horror. You know, it's basically blow for Sturgeon. This is the typical unionist media spin that's put on everything. But in actual fact, when you look at what happened yesterday at conference, what's happened is, for the first time ever, the SNP conference has decided to back a Scottish currency. Sturgeon didn't lose the vote on the new Scottish currency, she won it. There was an amendment, in fact there were several amendments made, and those of you who know this show well will have heard me talking about the Growth Commission report, and this was the report which basically said that we could have independence even if we ran the country as though we were a Tory government. And one part of this Growth Commission report was to say that if there was to be a Scottish currency, that it would have to meet 6 stringent tests. And one of those tests would be that it would have to be able to cope with a 15% budget deficit and be able to pay it down. Now, this is assuming a lot of things. It was assuming that we would inherit the deficit and that we would decide to take on Britain's debt, which we probably won't do. But anyway, the grassroots movement, the actual people who went to the conference, ordinary SNP members, voted this down. These 6 tests were a ridiculous condition. It would have meant that the Scottish currency from day one would have been wouldn't have happened. It would have taken years, maybe decades, for it to happen. And all that time we would have had to use English pounds and have the Bank of England decide our interest rates. We would have had no fiscal control whatsoever. And so the grassroots have put in an amendment which gets rid of these conditions. And so this is what the newspapers were saying meant that Nicola Sturgeon had lost the currency vote. When in actual fact, the whole of the party has won the currency vote. We've now got a firm commitment to a new Scottish pound. And that new Scottish pound, whatever you call it, it is a Scottish pound, but you can call it what you like. It's going to happen after independence, and people are going to be paid their pensions in Scottish pounds, and those Scottish pounds will be backed by a Scottish central bank, which has basically a full vault full of all of the foreign currency that it earns, plus the bankable commodities that we possess, such as oil and gas and renewable energy and whiskey and water and so on and so on. Scotland's actually floating in natural resources, and these are bankable commodities. So for the first time in its history, the SNP is backing a Scottish currency. Quite the reverse of Alex Salmond's original idea, where we would continue to share the pound with the United Kingdom as part of a currency union, which at the time might have seemed a reasonable proposition and something which would have been more palatable, shall we say, to the more UK among us, let's say. But anyway, this is now, that was then. What's happened now, though, is that independence sentiment, the actual backing for independent Scotland, has shot up. I mean, it's gone up by 4% virtually overnight, and that is in a UK newspaper poll, which is already heavily biased against independence, and their poll will be heavily weighted to prevent the result being too high. So I think we can take it to the bank that if 16 and 17-year-olds had been included in the poll, and I'm not saying they haven't, I don't know, but I would guess that with it being a British newspaper, they won't be. And with it being a British newspaper, they will try to probably exclude European Union voters from this as well. That the most likely thing is that this figure is far higher than 49% that they're telling us. It's more likely to be over 55% and as much as 60%. We know from previous polls, as I said last week, local poll, 25,000 people voted in a Scotsman poll, and said 66% of them wanted an independence referendum. And as I say, it's coming from the pro-UK newspapers, both of these polls. So David Lidington can't say that there's no appetite for independence anymore. The appetite is increasing. We're hungrier than ever for it. And the success of the SNP Spring Conference over the weekend is a testament to that. As these successes start to happen, we'll see less and less in the newspapers about them. Already there's been virtually a news blackout on primetime British television about the Scottish the National Party's conference. One or two small items. But basically they are trying to minimise everything that's happening here at the moment. The BBC is trying to shut out everything it can that is in any way positive about independence. Included in that, I would say, social media is also being heavily interfered with now by a number of different sources, but basically Facebook has now, as somebody called it, it's now become face block. My own viewing statistics since the indyref was announced just a few days ago have suddenly plunged. I've lost about 20,000 voters overnight. Disappeared. And that has never happened to indyref, to IndyCar since the last time that Facebook changed their algorithms, where they wiped off 100,000 views off my viewing statistics. This time they wiped off somewhere in the region of 20,000. And about the same amount of interactions have disappeared overnight off my official count. Now, some people have said, oh, it's maybe because of the SNP conference and people are watching news feeds about that. Well, maybe that's true, but it doesn't account for such a large drop and a sudden drop, and it's a bit of a coincidence that it's not just happening now. And lots of other people on social media are telling me that they're unable to comment on my videos, they're unable to reply to other people's comments on my videos. Some people can't get sound on the videos, some people can't even find videos, their notifications have disappeared, and most of us are reporting lots of unwanted suggested links to pro-UK sites like Scotland and Union. So we can see what social media is doing, and we can see the effect that GCHQ is having upon the social media statistics. They are manipulating them. I'm certain there are lots of sneaky tricks going on in the background in social media, on the internet in general, to massage the figures that we all see. So IndyCar will continue as it is, and I'll keep broadcasting the show as I always do. Don't be too put off if the figures look like they've dropped, because I know from the numbers of people who watch this show on a regular basis live, I know just how well the show's performing, and my own statistics bear this out. So whatever Facebook says to you, don't believe it. I take it with a big pinch of salt. Anyway, that's about it for today, but I feel buoyed up by the weekend's events. Now I know the currency is not going to be subjected to these 6 ridiculous tests. We are free to start our own economy from the get-go, from the word go. As soon as we're independent, we'll have that currency, and it will not be controlled in any way by the Bank of England. Our interest rates and our currency's value will be allowed to find its own level based on the resources, financial and physical resources of Scotland, and the amount of money pouring into the Scottish economy from friendly states all over the world who have already promised their support. We saw yesterday a prominent French politician who said yesterday on Twitter that Scotland should not be abandoned by France, and that if Scotland votes to leave the UK, that France should welcome Scotland back in to the family of nations of the European Union immediately, without any delay. So politicians in Europe are changing their minds. They're beginning to see Scotland now as an ally, and if Scotland becomes independent, there are promises coming now from European politicians that Scotland hasn't been forgotten about. And if we leave the UK, then we will be welcomed back with open arms. In fact, we will never have left. We will have stayed in the European Union the entire time. Anyway, it's a good day to be Scots, and it's a good day for the SNP generally. So everybody, enjoy the rest of your Sunday, and I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye bye for now.